Hello, and welcome to yet another Wheel of Time diary. This time, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the fourth episode on Lord of Chaos, book 6 of the series, where it's a very heavy rebound from what we covered last week. If you watched last week's diary, you know that I was a little bit less stoked on the book overall, just based off of my reading. Not to say that anything that I was reading was bad or super boring. There was just a little bit less going on actively in the chapters that I was reading. I felt like some of the chapters were a little bit longer than they needed to be, and Lord of Chaos was starting to feel just a tiny bit bloated, relatively speaking. That was how I felt as like the very quick, almost inappropriate summary of how I felt last week. This week we're back on a train of like, there was a ton of cool stuff happening and just generally a really great time reading. First off, I'll just say that compared to any of the last 3 weeks that I've spent covering this book, I read the most over the last 7 days in Lord of Chaos than I did in any previous diary for this book. About 9.5 hours read. Chapters 26 through 40 were read. I originally had myself planned or scheduled out to read chapters 26 through 35, so about 10 chapters. I ended up getting an extra 6 chapters read even beyond that, which means that I'm actually a decent bit ahead of schedule based off of what I have here. I have 2 bookmarks, one for where I'm at, one for where I hope to be at by the next diary, and then of course the rest of it will be for the last diary. There's a chance that I'll get even further ahead this week and then have very little to cover in the last diary, but we'll kind of see what happens. I don't know for sure, but the reading was great. Like I said, there were very cool moments, a lot of great character moments for the girls, we'll say, and then Rand's storyline was a little bit more on the backdrop this time around. It was basically the various girls' POVs that were really great here. I mean, there was a little bit of Rand, there was a little bit of Matt, but mostly it was the girls, and that stuff was just awesome. Really loved almost all of that. I don't know if there's really anything else to say for the spoiler free besides just the fact that I'm back on the hype train, so to speak. I'm really loving this one. It's been a great time. So for spoiler talk on Lord of Chaos, we'll start by recounting chapters 26 through 28, which were basically the portion of Rand's POV that I read over the week. Most everything else, I believe, was not Rand's POV directly, or at least like there was like very brief Rand POV once or twice in there, but like this was the block of Rand's POV for the week. Surprisingly enough, for the book all the way up to this point, it's basically just been Rand with a little bit from like Elaine slash Nynaeve prior, but this time around basically all the girls in this time. But Rand's POV in 26 to 28 was pretty good. In chapter 26, Rand is out with a band of his Aiel. They are ambushed by some white cloaks, Desora and, some of the others being killed in the ambush, including a local woman here in Camelin. I believe it's in Camelin when this happens. Rand has 3 of the white cloak perpetrators killed, hanged for this, and the last one of the perpetrators that was able to be caught in the aftermath of it sent to Commander Nile as a threat of sorts to say, yeah, don't ever try that again, or whatever it is that Rand is specifically trying to say. Pretty big moment, or important, disastrous kind of moment here, where tensions are going to be a little bit high between Rand and the White Cloaks, knowing where Morgase's position is at the moment with the White Cloaks. Rand returns to the palace in Camelin here and has Elenia, if that is how her name is pronounced, recount some of the history of the Sun Throne. I'm just misspeaking all of the time in this video for whatever reason. He gets confirmation basically just at the end of this chapter that he and Elaine are not actually related, or are not directly related in any meaningful way, which is very funny given some of the reveals that we had last week. That was an interesting little conversation they had, given that Elenia is sorta, I believe she has the nearest claim to the Sun Throne who isn't Morgase or Elaine. So, but chapters 27 and 28 basically involve, going back and forth between Egwene's POV and Rand's as some of the more Carrion plot line is concerned. Egwene meets with Rand in Carrion at the beginning of chapter 27. She basically insists on him not entertaining Elida's emissaries from the White Tower, since the emissaries are here in Carrion now. The other Aes Sedai do arrive, since, you know, Egwene knew about this ahead of time, and Egwene is hidden from view when the emissaries try to speak with Rand. She is hidden by an invisible barrier made by Rand, basically, so the Aes Sedai cannot see that she is there in the chamber. Given that she's a sort of runaway of sorts, it makes sense that this was a thing that happened. I think she intended to be gone before the Aes Sedai arrived, but they apparently arrived early. So Rand has a little meeting with the Aes Sedai here in his chamber in Carrion, and Egwene listens as Rand basically takes more command of the situation than she predicted he would. It's turning out that Rand is a little bit more of a proper leader than she kind of predicted that he would be. So after the meeting, the Aes Sedai leave, and so Egwene gets hints of Lews Theron's voice in Rand's head. Rand has kind of been letting it out a little bit more, that like he tilts his head and responds to the voice of Lews Theron in the background there a little bit more explicitly than I think he intends to. So Egwene sort of notices this at the end of chapter 27, and then the very end of the chapter has a brief POV from some of the Aes Sedai that visited Rand, and some of them talking about, or at least one of them mentioning, that there was definitely an Aes Sedai in there and that Rand was probably hiding her. They presume that this is probably Moraine or the mysterious green Aes Sedai that they don't know anything about. So basically the same thing as the last time we had some of these POVs when when Egwene was trying to eavesdrop on some of them. Names are very easy to get confused in this series, I swear. Chapter 28 returns once again to Rand's POV primarily. There's lots of weird little like teaching moments for Rand, basically involving how Jieto works, or whatever, however that's pronounced, the Aiel system of honor, how that works, the technicalities of some of it being discussed. Rand apparently very heavily embarrasses Aviendha in just by asking questions. His ignorance causes her much embarrassment with some of the other Aiel. She has to scold him about that after the fact. The main thing that happens in chapter 28, however, is not Rand learning a little bit about the Aiel system of honor. It's the fact that a gray man manages to sneak into Rand's chamber, and Taim also happens to be here through a gateway all of a sudden. Rand tries to capture the gray man so that he can interrogate it or something, figure out some way to figure out what it knows, or who sent it to him or whatever. Taim kills the gray man before Rand has a chance to do this. So apparently Taim has an important potential channeler that he wants Rand to come take note of, or come visit. Something along those lines. Not really sure what's going on there. That's just a little brief meeting between Taim and Rand here in the chapter because of this gray man. Taim was like, okay, yeah, I have someone that you need to see. So I'm predicting that the next time we get a direct Rand POV, we're going to be dealing with this plot line. Basically, the rest of the reading does not have anything from Rand, though, so we're basically going to be moving on to the girls' POVs. But first, at the very end of chapter 28 is actually Padan Fain making a return as a POV, because he is nearby Carrion. He apparently becomes very upset hearing that a Forsaken has tried to steal Rand as his prey from him, because one of the Forsaken is one of the ones that sent the gray man to kill Rand. So Padan Fain hears words of this and is like, no, that's my kill, how dare you? So he's kind of angry about that. You know, just typical Wheel of Time cartoony villains being cartoony villains type of thing. Chapters 29 through 30 are a little bit more of a Nynaeve POV, where Tom and Sandar return to Saladar here. They are summoned by some of the Aes Sedai to tell what they've learned out and about, doing their searches, whatever they've been doing for the Hall out here, including some rumor that they tell Nynaeve specifically, or rather that they tell Elaine specifically in this moment, I'm pretty sure. Maybe both of them are together. I forget off the top of my head, about Morgaine joining up forces with the White Cloaks to take back Andor. So there's the rumor of this going around, that this is all but a thing that's happening, and Elaine kind of can't believe that this is true. She's like kind of taken aback by it, that Morgase would trust anyone, let alone White Cloaks specifically, to help her take back the throne. But of course, there's also the fact that like no one really knows that Morghese is still alive yet. She's still uncertain. Based off of how certain the rumors are around in the area, though, they can be reasonably sure that Morghese is in fact still alive. The back half of the chapter, however, is the real cool moment because Nynaeve goes back and heals Logain in just some miraculous fit of anger. She's just like feeling for the little hole that the missing one power makes. Is just like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna weave some random stuff in here and see if I can heal this. But she's like not actually like trying to heal him. She's just exploring around with it because she's actually trying to heal Swan and Leanne, figure out how to do that. So in the course of doing this and being angry about what's going on, because Nynaeve is always angry, she accidentally heals Logain of his inability to use the power. So she has fixed his gentling. He is now able to channel again, and in the aftermath of this means that there's a lot of Aes Sedai that are just there having to hold him basically hostage with the power so that he can't go out and channel. And this holding him hostage is something that goes on for basically the rest of the POVs, as far as I understand in the chapter so far. They don't really trust that he's not gonna, you know, go on a tirade. And of course, he's a male with the power, so there's a lot of questions surrounding that in the first place. But yeah, Nynaeve heals Logain, and I thought that the actual event of her healing Logain was a little bit less exciting than the build-up towards it. Like, you can tell it's going to happen. It's like, oh yeah, like, this is going to happen. This is important. Very clearly, RJ is building up towards, yeah, Logain's healed now. And then the actual reveal of like, oh yeah, Logain's healed now. It was a little bit anticlimactic to me, but overall, it was still a cool moment. Chapter 30 very much follows along these lines because Nynaeve has Elaine go out to tell the other Aes Sedai, or at least tell Sheriam specifically, and Sheriam only, that she just healed Logain. Like, this is a big deal. So it's like, yeah, go tell her, like, we need to figure something out with this, like, immediately. Turns out Elaine is a little bit hasty and makes this pronouncement not just to Sheriam, but to a couple of the other Aes Sedai. So there's a whole train of them that come take Logain hostage, basically hold him so that he can't use the power, shield him from the power, and then an entire train of yellows following Nynaeve, where the Hall is taking her to heal Swan and Leanne, just to be like, I don't believe that you actually did this, but in the case that you did, do it with the women and prove it, because women can't feel when men use the power or anything like this. There's no way for them to prove that Logain was healed besides Logain just using the power, and they can't really risk letting him do that, because if they do, well, he could probably, you know, be a heck of a predicament to deal with here in Saladar. The point is that they want Nynaeve to heal Swan and Leanne because, well, they're women, and if they were to channel, it would be very obvious to literally all of the other Aes Sedai that, like, oh yeah, she just healed them, and she does. She heals Swan and Leanne. I thought these moments were as climactic as they needed to be, so that was very cool. The women, however, we note, are much weaker than they used to be post-healing, whereas Logain seems to be, just off of very first notice, possibly, if not definitely as strong as he was before being gentled. So there's some question marks there associated with how the healing of stilling versus gentling goes. Some of the rules of the magic with that are going to be question marks for me for a little while. But yeah, Swan and Leanne basically discuss after the fact, because there's a POV from Swan here. They discuss grief in losing some warders, because Swan being, you know, given back the power, essentially, her connection and tie to her previous warder who was killed in the usurping of her place in the White Tower just so recently before, comes flooding back, whereas it basically wasn't really a thing that she could feel when she was stilled. So this comes back. There's a little bit of a grief discussion here that I thought was pretty good and powerful. And in the aftermath of healing Swan and Leanne, Nynaeve is basically subjugated by the Yellows to show them how to do the healing that she did. There's a lot more that everybody wants to know about how this works. All of them also want to heal Nynaeve's block, basically break her block so that she doesn't have to be angry to do any of this stuff. Instead, they're having to make her angry so that she can teach them anything. It's kind of a funny little dynamic going on there. But yeah, that is Nynaeve's place in Saladar at the moment now, is just being subject to a lot of tests to let the Yellows learn as much about this form of healing as they can, because it was previously believed that it was impossible to heal Stilling or Gentling, and Nynaeve just did both of them now. So that's a pretty crazy reveal. Swan and Leanne also in the aftermath want Nynaeve to try to heal them, quote unquote, again, because they are so much weaker. They want to see if they can get more powerful. It turns out this isn't a thing that they can do, because like you can't heal what is not hurt. So Nynaeve can't heal them being disconnected from the power in this way, because they're no longer disconnected from the power. They just happen to be a lot weaker than they used to be. So there's something interesting there. One of the Aes Sedai named Delana promises to help Swan with something. I didn't really actually catch what was actually going on here. There's something about the fact that there's a revived Forsaken named Arengar, who we covered in one of the previous diaries for the book here. This Forsaken shows up to strike fear in Delana at the end of this chapter, and there's some confusing stuff going on. I can't tell what exactly is going on with Delana, like what is it that's causing this association between Arengar, this revived Forsaken, and her. Like, I don't think Delana's Black Aja, but maybe she is. I'm not entirely sure I understood that portion of the chapter, so some clarification there would be pretty nice. Chapter 31 turns out being a sort of interim chapter. We return back to Commander Niall of the White Cloaks as a POV, and one of the other White Cloaks to actually start. You get one of the White Cloaks named Valda, who definitely thinks pretty poorly of Niall, planning to succeed Niall when Niall dies, because he's pretty old now at this point. So this is something that we're getting from Valda's POV. Niall does not seem to like Valda very much either. We get his POV, and neither of these characters seem to think very highly of each other. Interesting to note that. I'll probably forget that at some point, but it's interesting to note here nonetheless. Morghese is actually on the verge now of making an escape, because while she's been trying to play Deus de Mar and like play the game of houses, try to sort of trick Niall into thinking she's going to side with him while trying to do something else on the side, like she's unable to. So it turns out that some of her followers and some of her friends here in the area are trying to help her just straight up escape, because she doesn't want to relinquish power or anything to the White Cloaks to help her take Andor, because she doesn't trust them. The result of this is that it isn't successful. Instead, Morghese happens to be summoned by Niall, where she passes some of the people who are going to help her escape being hanged for something they've done. She's unsure if it's because they were planning to help her or if it's because of some other reason, but she basically is forced to concede to Niall and signs Niall's treaty, quote unquote, so that they can retake Andor, with the promise that Niall will have some element of power in the country or in the nation, just like the White Cloaks kind of do in a lot of other places in the world. In the background, a couple of the other White Cloak POVs, a couple of the other White Cloak characters called Asunawa and Saren, I guess, are wishing for her to have put up a little bit more resistance, or for her to continue resistance against Niall instead of signing his treaty, so that they can kill her instead more easily, because they evidently don't trust her. A lot of political maneuvering going on between all the various different factions of this book. There's been a lot of that in this one, and this is no different. But this brings us to the bulk of today's video, even though I've already been talking for a very long time, largely revolving around the girls. So there is basically just stuff, and by the girls, I mean, like, this time it's actually basically just Egwene. It is almost entirely Egwene's POV for like the next 6 chapters, and then the last 3 chapters intermix between Egwene and Matt. So like there's a lot of Egwene stuff happening here. I'm going to try to summarize this as well as I can, because not all of the details need to be explained. There's a lot that goes into this, so let's just kind of jump right into it. Chapter 32, Egwene is finally allowed to join the Wise Ones in visiting with the Aes Sedai in Tel'aran'rhiod. The first thing that happens when the other Aes Sedai see her is basically like, you are summoned to Saladar, so you better find a way to get here as quickly as possible. Egwene obviously accepts the calling, because she's not going to deny the other Aes Sedai. That is the bulk of what happens in this chapter, is Egwene being summoned to Saladar, accepting. She assumes that this is under the pretense that they'd have discovered that she's been pretending to be Aes Sedai when she's only accepted at this point, which is not something that you're supposed to do when you're training to be an Aes Sedai. So she thinks she's going to be punished for this. Side note, what happens during this meeting as well is that Rand happens to be watching the exchange. He just happens to be in Tel'aran'rhiod watching this as it happens there in the Stone of Tyr, because I guess he visits the Stone of Tyr in Tel'aran'rhiod to, you know, be able to hold Kalendor sometimes. It's like some sort of thing for power for him. I don't know the details, but the point is that he happens to be watching this exchange, so he now knows where Saladar is, because the other Aes Sedai have to show Egwene where Saladar is using some form of map representation. So there's some of that going on. Chapter 33, Egwene admits her lies to the Wise Ones and she incurs toll for it. This means that she is given the first spanking scene of the series. Let's go! Huge pog moment. This scene was actually pretty okay. I know there's a lot of complaints about the spanking and stuff in Wheel of Time. This chapter, actually, the entire context surrounding why Egwene is kind of punished for lying to all of the Wise Ones, essentially lying for visiting Tel'aran'rhiod when she said she wasn't, or when she said she wouldn't, and several other things. I thought the context behind the scene was actually pretty okay. So there's that little tangent out of the way. Part of chapter 33 is Rand visiting Mat, where he is at, traveling south. Rand commands Mat to go to Saladar through a gateway that he's going to open for them. Basically, like, yeah, it's going to be, Mat gives Rand the timeline of like, yeah, I could do this in 2 hours. So Rand's like, okay, in 2 hours, I'm going to send you over a few days out from Saladar so that you can march over to Saladar with the army, give them time to prepare that you're there, basically intimidate them, because Rand wants Mat to get Elaine so that he can take Elaine to Caemlyn and therefore take the Lion Throne and then have claim for the Sun Throne as well. And then he also wants for Mat to get Egwene, because he now knows that Egwene is going to Saladar. He wants her for some reason. I forget exactly what that was. Maybe to make sure she's safe or okay. Forget the exact dynamic of some of that. Basically, he wants him to protect Egwene because he knows that she's there now. He wants Mat to, like I said, intimidate Saladar, intimidate the Aes Sedai here in the Little Tower, hopefully to encourage them to side with Rand to some degree, because he's not going to attack them directly. But then we switch back to Egwene's POV, where she is wished well on her journeys to Saladar. She's basically being released from being some sort of apprentice for the Wise Ones. She is welcomed back anytime, saying like, you can come back and continue training under me whenever you want, but for now you need to go to Saladar. Clearly you know how to enter Tel'aran'rhiod physically. This is something that she says that she knows how to do. So she decided that she's going to do that because apparently she can enter Tel'aran'rhiod physically, so she's able to travel much quicker. The chapter is largely just her traveling directly to Saladar through Tel'aran'rhiod in just a few hours, what would normally take like months of real life travel. So that basically means that we are immediately now in Saladar with Egwene's POV, where she discovers that Swan has been healed by Nynaeve's hand. Pretty big revelation for her there. She is told by the Hall she is to be the new Amyrlin, though. That is like the craziest thing that I wasn't expecting to happen here. I was thinking that maybe she was right along the lines of, oh yeah, she was discovered pretending to be an Aes Sedai, so she's going to be punished. No, she's going to be the new Amyrlin now. So that's something that happens. Chapter 35 is basically Egwene being taken through the steps of being appointed as the Amyrlin, between like oaths, not the 3 oaths of becoming an Aes Sedai, because even though she's not an Aes Sedai yet, she's being raised to Amyrlin because of technicalities that the Hall has decided upon. There's a lot of technical stuff going on here, but Egwene is taken through the process of being raised as the Amyrlin, both as this process with them tonight, accepting the offer to be Amyrlin, because, well, if she doesn't, then there's going to be a lot of trouble politically speaking with the Aes Sedai. The process of the Hall also accepting her to be the Amyrlin as well. And then the next day as well, in chapter 36, Egwene actually being appointed before the congregation of all of the Aes Sedai in Saladar. She immediately, as like her first degree, part of her like ceremonial speech of like, oh yeah, I'm the Amyrlin now, part of her speech is to raise Theodrin, Faylane, who I don't actually think I know off the top of my head who Faylane is. I know Theodrin because she's the one who's been trying to break Nynaeve's magical block for a while. Elaine and Nynaeve as well. So these four, Theodrin, Faylane, Elaine, and Nynaeve, two just straight up Aes Sedai, no longer being accepted. They're just straight up Aes Sedai now. Obviously, they'll take the 3 oaths whenever the group in Saladar is able to retake the actual White Tower and get the Oath Rod. But these 4 are now Aes Sedai, so Elaine and Nynaeve are Aes Sedai now. That is the point, and that's a pretty big moment that happens immediately after Egwene being made Amyrlin, which is still kind of crazy to me. It's weird to think of that as being the direction that the series went. The Hall and Sheriam make some of their protestations to some of the things that Elaine said and changed about the speech because the Hall basically wrote what she was supposed to say up there, accepting the Amyrlin position. But Egwene sends for Nynaeve and Elaine basically immediately to visit with them and to some degree congratulate them on being raised to Aes Sedai by her hand. Nynaeve and Elaine confess to knowing about the Bowl of the Winds. They tell Egwene about the Bowl of the Winds, explain the political pickle that she's all in and what they're in regarding this whole situation. Egwene more or less is able to get them on the fast track to being able to do that now that they are Aes Sedai instead of simple accepted. So that's a plot line that we're going to have moving forward with Elaine and Nynaeve. I'm sure that's going to go on with this book and probably be in the next book as well, given how much people complain about it. So I'm predicting that that'll be a thing in A Crown of Swords. I'm not super against the idea of this plot line inherently, so we'll see what goes on with that. Chapter 37 has quite a few notes here of things that happen. Nynaeve and Elaine now, instead of just confessing to wanting to go to Ebu Dar to get the Bowl of the Winds instead of wherever else it was that they were supposed to be going, they confess to capturing Moghedien, one of the Forsaken. So they confess this to Egwene. They bring Moghedien to Egwene. So big moment here. Egwene shows the Forsaken that she knows how to travel, like she's somehow been able to put together the pieces of how to travel using the power the way that Rand has, which is apparently something that female Aes Sedai just haven't known how to do or haven't known was possible to do for a good long while. So that was a scary moment. Egwene manages to intimidate for Moghedien to a surprising degree, even beyond what Nynaeve and Elaine have already been able to do up to this point. Swan arrives here to teach and advise Egwene about how to be an Amyrlin, stuff like that. There's a lot of like political maneuvering stuff going on, very brief POVs from both Ramonda and Lelaine, a couple of the Aes Sedai of the Hall of the Tower, you know, thinking about their decision to help raise Egwene to the Amyrlin, basically as ways to get at each other. So Ramonda and Elaine basically saying, yeah, we raised her because I don't want the other one to have been the Amyrlin. So it's like some political stuff going on between them that I'm interested to know a little bit more about. Both of these two don't like that Egwene selected Sheriam to be the keeper, however, so that's again more political stuff that I'm interested to know more about. Delana, who I've already asked questions about earlier in this video, was apparently supposed to be at like meetings that both of these Aes Sedai were having with some of the other Aes Sedai, because she's supposed to be like playing both sides on account of Arengar. More political questions that I'm not 100% sure I understand at this point. Arengar is also apparently under the pseudonym of Halima, something like that, pulling the strings here in Saladar as far as she's concerned. I'm not entirely sure what the entire situation there is. Really don't know, couldn't tell you, so I'm just gonna gloss right over it and not try to explain it any further because I don't know how to explain it. Swan is apparently in on the plotting with Lelaine, specifically regarding Egwene and whatnot, or at least that she tells Lelaine or is able to express to Lelaine that she doesn't really seem to like Egwene very much. There's some political stuff going on here because Egwene's trying to play a political game with the Hall and with some of them to suggest that, yeah, I am not your toy, like I am the Amyrlin, you will listen to me. You know, political give and take between them as well. So like Swan's kind of helping as far as Lelaine is concerned here. Not entirely sure what's going on. It seems at least that the Blues might seem to support Egwene outright as the Amyrlin. That may be the thing that's going on here. Again, I'm not entirely sure. At the same time, Ramonda, you know, her considerations, Nynaeve is with Ramonda. here at this meeting, whatever, telling her something. This is kind of when I got the idea that it seems like Egwene is trying to trick Ramonda, and that Elaine is kind of more on the side of her. There's like a, not a love triangle, it is a political triangle of just confusion going on here in Saladar. So there's a lot of like little details about that in this chapter. I'm not entirely sure I understand or understood all of them, but there is plenty of it there, so I might need some of that explained a little bit more, but maybe I'll understand more of it implicitly as time goes on. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of Aes Sedai politics because of Egwene being Amyrlin now. Elaine is with Sheriam, expressing fear from Egwene, quote unquote, about the power that Ramonda and maybe Lelaine have. She basically begs for Sheriam to be a good keeper for Egwene, to be a good buffer between her and these other two Aes Sedai, Ramonda and Lelaine. So like there's a whole lot of stuff here, like I said, going on that I'm not entirely sure I'm following completely, but there's a lot of mini POVs. Like the entire back half of this chapter was like maybe quarter page POVs, maybe half page at most POVs, just like, oh, this one, this one, this one, this one, back to this one, back to this one, back to this one. It's just like, not entirely sure I followed all of it specifically, but at the very end, it seems like Egwene is satisfied with her political maneuvering. So I guess all of the previous pieces that happened in the chapter are associated with this. I'm not sure I fully understood how all of it was put together, but that's basically what happened. Chapters 38 through 40, however, are the time when Mat's POV and Egwene's POV kind of overlap and go back and forth a little bit. It is because Mat and his army are outside of Saladar at this point now, having already been sent to the forest outside of the town or the village by Rand. Mat goes with Aviendha and a few of the others, specifically of the group, to find the girls in the village to enter Saladar intentionally. Mat is taken to the Little Tower. He berates Elaine and Nynaeve and Egwene before it is finally revealed to him in a moment of like quasi panic that Egwene is actually the Amyrlin that he criticized so heavily. So there's some funny interactions that are involved with Mat just being so disrespectful to them and just being very uncouth and unfriendly, but like it's hilarious at the same time. In chapter 29, Egwene and Mat do not come to any real agreements before he storms off. Sheriam enters the study afterwards to discuss with Egwene about the Little Tower leaving Saladar, how circumstances kind of force their hand associated with where Elida and the rest of the actual White Tower are at, and them knowing about where they are. And basically there's a lot of political stuff. Like a lot of the reading this week was politically related and just little details that I'm still kind of putting together in my head and still have to put together as time goes on, you know, just kind of implicitly understanding how things are going. In chapter 40, Mat gets counseled by Tom because he goes to talk to Tom. He determines it might be better to stay with Elaine, even though Elaine and Nynaeve are planning to go to Abu Dar, where Mat is insistent on taking Elaine at the very least to Caemlyn. There's some tension going on with this. Tom is like, yeah, well, my job is mostly just to protect Elaine. Like, I can't force her to do anything. So if they're going to Abu Dar, I'm going to Abu Dar with them, and you should probably do the same, is what Tom tells Mat. Elaine searches for Aviendha in the city. She crosses Birgit along the way. Birgit explains sort of some of her reservations with being a legend, where most of her previous incarnations in the world are associated with being born but not knowing that she is this legendary character who's so important in the turning of the wheel and the various different ages and her role in it, where this time she's like, she was just straight up dragged out of Tel'aran'rhiod into the real world. So she knows her legend, she knows the role she's supposed to play. She's expressing reservations about this. She doesn't want for her like actual identity to be revealed to Egwene, even though Egwene basically already knows, essentially, because Egwene recognizes her from having seen her in Tel'aran'rhiod. You know, complicated stuff with this. Elaine actually finds Aviendha in the end after this little brief discussion with Birgit. They go to her rooms. Aviendha asks for Toh to be granted to her because Aviendha is here to apologize, essentially, be like, yeah, I slept with Rand, and I know Rand is supposed to be yours, so yeah, there's an honor system thing here, you need to beat me. And Elaine's like, I'm not going to do that. In fact, there's actually a third person who we're all supposed to, you know, love Rand, or we all love Rand, and that's just kind of a thing. And Avienda is kind of like Min and very ready to share Rand with the others if that is what prophecy calls for or whatever. So whatever, weird funny discussions between some of these characters. So that more or less covers what's going on. We're looking into the future with chapters 41 and through the end of the book is basically Elaine and Nynaeve going to be heading down to Abu Dar to try to find the Bowl of the Winds. Pretty sure that's not going to be finished up in this book. Who really cares? Rand's POV is basically going to be dealing with, man, I don't even remember at this point. There's just so much to cover that I forget the exact details. Oh yeah, that's right. Rand basically going with Taim to meet whoever this mysterious male channeler is with potential or something that Rand needs to meet and do something about. So that's where that POV is going to go. Matt, really not sure. I'm presuming that he's probably going to follow Nynaeve and Elaine. Not entirely sure. However, and then whatever other miscellaneous POVs go on, I'm not quite sure yet. What I do know is that after, you know, this conversation at the end of chapter 40 with Elaine and Avienda about Min and the three of them all being in love with Rand and whatever all that stuff means, I know that the next couple chapters are Min POVs. I love Min's POVs. She's one of my favorite characters in the series for as little page time as she gets. So I'm excited to do more reading. But with that being said, I've been rambling too much. There was a lot to cover this week. I hope for the next couple episodes of Wheel of Time Diaries to be a little bit shorter. I suppose there is a very small chance that I might actually end up finishing this book early, like an entire week early, depending on what this weekend looks like, because of taking time off related to my birthday. In fact, this video actually comes out on my birthday, I'm realizing. So there's a chance that I might actually finish this book a week early, in which case I'll be covering the rest of the book next week, which will be another really long, really rambly and bad video. And then the week after that, I'll have to figure something else out to fill the Thursday spot. We'll see what kind of happens, but I'm excited. Like I said, the reading this week was pretty good. There was a lot of really great material. There's a lot of political stuff that I'm still trying to figure out a bit, but like Egwene being raised to Amerlin was so cool, and like that made the entire book worth it. Quite frankly, it's one of the coolest moments in the series for me. Yeah, so that is how I feel right now. Looking forward to finishing the book here pretty soon, within the next couple of weeks. I'm most of the way through it, and then next year especially, I'm going to be excited to be crushing all of the rest of Robert Jordan's books in 2026. So yeah, that's something that I'm looking forward to. But thank you for watching this. If you did, I apologize for being bad at rambling with these videos and them just being really low quality. I will see you guys in the next one. I hope to see you next week, whether it's the last diary for this book or not.